Hello, my name is Rick Houston, and welcome to the Scene Vault Podcast, your source for all things NASCAR history. Presented by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace.
Luckily, I answered the phone. My roommate didn't answer. I answered
Tara?
it, and it was Tara on the phone. And she said, it's time. It's the middle of the night. You know, we probably took off about 4:30-ish. You know, it's early morning. Not many people are up. As we were landing, the medical plane was taking off. She called me the next day, and she said, I'm on my way to the hospital. And I'm thinking, heart problem, heart condition, something's going on. You know, like that was my, you know, not thinking that the child that we were getting ready to adopt was coming to the world. She said, no, I'm away to go meet Jagger.
The day NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past, that's the day we don't have any future.
Talked to Rusty pretty early on for the show, and he said that year in particular, 95, he and Dale were pretty ticked off at this Gordon kid coming in and kicking their butts. Did you ever get any of the residual flack over that because you had been a Rainbow Warrior at one time?
No. I think that was kind of more internally personal with Dale and Rusty, and I think they called him Wonder Boy at the time.
Yeah.
And it was really just to get under Jeff's skin. You know, that was their intimidation factor. Today, we would call that bullying, so to speak. But that's not what they were. You know, they just, this young kid, and these guys were getting older, and they were getting beat. They didn't like it, unfortunately. But that was more internally for them. I mean, as far as, you know, I was still friends with crew members over there. You live and sleep in these garages for so many hours, you don't have many enemies. The only time you have enemies is when somebody comes in your pit box during the race, and, you know, that's when you jump them and beat the hell out of them. But other than that, you know, you're friends with everybody. You're done when the garage closes, you go back, you shower, hotel, and you go out to eat, and you're seeing these same people again. So, no, there was never really, you know, it might have been something that happened in the motorhome lot that they, you know, kind of were messing with them. And maybe just trying to ruffle his feathers a little bit.
How much of a difference was there working with Rusty as opposed to Jeff?
Oh. Talent-wise, they both were very talented. But as far as over the radio, what changes in the communication that went on was 180 opposite. Rusty tell you exactly what he wanted. He'd tell you to the quarter round on the track bar, half a round in the wedge, half a pound of air pressure. I mean, he knew it. Jeff, he'd describe it the best he could. And then it was Ray's job to figure it out. That's where Ray became a very phenomenal crew chief, because he had to learn from the communication that Jeff was giving him to what the car would need or do, and he'd make the car better. And whether he did or not, Jeff drove the shit out of it and had results. Whether made the car better or not, I don't know. But Jeff still showed results. But that was really the difference between the two. You remember, Jeff was young, didn't really give a shit, type guy coming in. And Rusty was this clean cut. He working for Roger Penske. You had standards. You know, Roger was, you know, had his ways of how he wanted things. And so Rusty was kind of that clean cut, you know, type driver that's just, he was going to be aggressive, but he just did things differently than Jeff and was able to communicate, you know, chassis stuff to the car that made it much easier for the crew chiefs.
Now, do you remember the Rusty Dale water bottle incident?
Oh, yeah.
At Bristol?
At Bristol. Yeah, I think Dale spun Rusty out within the first 20 laps, maybe, of the race. We had high hopes. That was when we were running midnight. That was the famous Penske car. And usually that car never lost. Or, it always had a good deal. But to go through that water bottle incident, and that was hard to understand because here they're friends. But hell, they're getting ready to beat the shit out of each other after this race. And you can't figure out why. You got spun out, but I mean, that was 480 laps ago. But emotions were high. It's Bristol. But yeah, I was kind of right in the middle of it when that whole incident went down.
So was I. I was in the media scrum around Dale, and I mean, I wish I still had the tape, but you could hear the water bottle hit Dale.
Yeah.
It went.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, I was there. I remember it.
Were you hoping Rusty would get a lick in, or were you trying to prevent it?
Well, they all talk a bunch of crap anyways. I mean, how many times do you ever see punches thrown?
Yeah.
Maybe Harvick, Biffle. There was an incident, Kyle Busch and Logano not long ago at Vegas. I think Kyle come up with a bloody forehead or nose or something. But there wasn't many punches thrown back in the day. It was more just running their mouths and scuffling just and, talk, jabber jawing and I don't know. It was more talk and, kind of who was the big guy and, so you never really saw fights. I think crew members fought more than drivers did.
Well, tell me about that.
We never really had many fights other than, when another crew member comes in your pits, it's game on from there. If you're coming in there to raise hell and bicker about something, whatever, it's game on. We've always been told you protect your property. Or if a crew member's coming down to yell at a crew chief for something that his driver did. But now you got the spotters. The spotters they handle all that at the top, it seems like now. But you just, there was some scuffle and you push and shove them. Nothing serious, nothing major. Nobody noses or teeth knocked out that I know of.
All right, I'm just going to ask, and you can name names or not name names, but do you remember a particular incident like that really got to you?
No. I mean, you had people that I will say, I won't mention any names, but he was on our team. And this is during the 95 season, and was, you got a driver telling you one thing, your crew chief's telling you another thing. And this is when I was doing tires. Let's use that. I was a tire specialist. And you got somebody else trying to tell you to do this or do that. I'm caught in the middle. And I finally looked up at him and I said, "You are not the crew chief. You are not my boss. Get the hell out of my face." And this is my team member. But he was trying to run the setups of the cars. And, it was just the heat of the moment because I was kind of caught in the middle. You got a driver telling you one thing. You got a crew chief that you're trying to be respectful. And then you have a chassis guy coming in. Very knowledgeable people. But again, if the driver thinks he's got one thing, especially when he knows his chassis stuff, and that's not the changes that he's got, probably the next change we make is probably going in the wrong direction because the communication wasn't correct. But it all worked out. I never really had issues with anybody. Tried not to anyways. I was tried to be low-key, humble. But, I mean, you'll have small scuffle arguments, nothing serious.
All right. When did you meet Tara?
So we met in Daytona, 1997. I was working for Penske, Rusty Wallace, and we were out at a restaurant. And just crossed paths. We were with a group of people, And so it was Daytona of 1997.
At the end, when did you make the move over to Roush?
At the end of 97.
At the end of 97?
Yep.
Okay.
I started there. That's when Roush had moved from Liberty, the 6-car, down to Mooresville to move into the shop with Jeff Burton at the time. During that transition, Buddy Parrott, who left Penske prior to me coming there, went to Roush. And so when I interviewed with Buddy to end up at Roush.
What's an interview with Buddy Parrott?
Oh my God. it was I can't even remember, but it just stands out. You know, it's pretty much talks about motorcycles.
Yeah.
The fun. Not really much business other than this is what I want you to do, and then everything else is, you know. Yeah. But that was in 98, at the end of 97, beginning of 98, I transitioned over to Roush. And Buddy was the team manager over the 6-car and the 99 car. Jeff Burton and Mark Martin, because they were moving the 6 down. And they were hiring all new people. So I took the transition change into a car chief at that point. Again, I was trying to position myself better. I learned from what I learned at Penske's as an assistant setup guy. You know, I had a little bit of knowledge and understanding. I wanted to take it to the next level and be myself. So that's when I interviewed with Buddy and went there with Jimmy Fenning, was the crew chief. And best move I ever made. I enjoyed Penske's. I enjoyed Robin Pemberton. Mike Egge was the engine builder at the time. We all had a great relationship, but I had to look out for Shawn. I had to look out for me, what I was going to do, because what Penske's had in place, there was not any room getting ready to open up for me to kind of transition. I didn't like changing jobs because I was learning at that point, like, you don't need to really change jobs. But between the end of November and about the second week of December, in the Mooresville complex, it was kind of like, watch out for the forklifts because everybody's toolboxes are moving. You know, the shops were so close together that everybody was just forklifting their toolbox down to the next shop. They were moving, you know, across the street here, going to this one, you know, whatever. And that's just kind of how it worked. It was kind of secretive until the day they left. They rolled the toolbox up and left. So when I went over there, that's kind of how it was too. You know, we were hiring all new people. I didn't know who we were hiring because Buddy was handling all that. And but that was probably the best move that I ever did.
How long did it take you and Tara to get serious?
So pretty quickly. She was still doing some stuff with Winston promotion.
Now, she was Miss Winston.
Yeah. On as a backup, I think is how it was. You know, you had your primary, and if something would happen, they were sick, couldn't make it, you know, whatever, you had your backup. It's kind of like first runner-up, so to speak. And so she was doing a lot of that stuff with them. That's when Winston had their big promotional company, and they were doing a lot of extra stuff out in the campgrounds, and so she would do a lot of that type of stuff. So she was still kind of going to the races as I was transitioning into my new job, and I was getting ready to go to the races. So, but she kind of moved to our area in location of Cornelius in Lake Norman area. And she was still transitioning, going to the racetracks, and I was. So we would see each other. We were dating, but we kept it professional. You know, I did my thing, she did her thing at night. You know, we kind of hang out, you know, go to dinner, whatever. So it became serious then, but we just tried to keep it professional.
Was there some sort of rule in place that Miss Winston was not supposed to date?
Well,
anybody? I mean,
supposed to be.
Was this on the down low? Was that part of the attraction?
Yeah. And I think there was some other drivers that dated some same situational Miss Winston's drivers. And so, they kept it on the low, down low. And we kind of did the same thing. Although, as she was transitioning out of the Miss Winston back, she was doing other stuff, and it wasn't as in critical. But you still didn't make it, a huge public thing. Although everybody kind of knew because, you're at home, you go out to dinner. You remember, you're in a town, a city that you're running into everybody every night. Grocery store, gas station, church, wherever you were always seeing somebody in the industry somewhere. And so it's kind of hard to keep anything secret. So.
What was the timeline on getting married and then her surgery? And when did you know that there was an issue with that?
Well, when we first met, actually the first night, I think majority of our conversation was about her health.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Because we weren't out partying. We weren't out, going crazy. We were just kind of like at a club or a restaurant / club, kind of, had some music playing with her. But it was just part of our conversation. Because I kind of knew of her a little bit. But I didn't know her history. I didn't know her story. Because everybody has a story. And she just opened up. And so we just got talking about it. And it kind of really hit me because, I had a soft spot. It was kind of like, wow. I mean, she's telling me all this and what's going on. And so after Daytona, we come home. And then she come to down to Cornelius. And we got a little bit more in depth, about everything. Well, about that same time, she was having issues with her heart going into flutter, like almost racing higher than your normal heartbeats. Well, the only way you could pace that out is you'd have to go to the hospital. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I don't know how to. I'm not used to ready for this, So she talked me through it, walked me through it, and here we get in the car and we head to Winston-Salem. You go in the emergency room, and you're with your any heart conditions or any severe type of I don't want to say pain, but condition or something going on. You kind of get rushed in first. So with her heart condition, she was a priority going in. But you go in, they hook the machines to it, they pace it out, you go ahead on home. It was just kind of a normal thing. But to me, it was very, I don't know how to describe the word, but it's just, I felt bad because of what she was having to go through. I mean, this is sometimes, it could happen 2-3 times a week.
And this was before you were married?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. This would be, sometimes we could, she would be at home and she'd just sit there and kind of relax and try to let it pace itself out. Kind of like the pacemaker was supposed to kick in and take over and make your heart beat normally in this. And it wouldn't. So you'd have to go to the hospital.
Did she have a pacemaker?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so her being from the Winston-Salem area, that's where we had to go. That's where her doctors were. We were driving an hour from Cornelius up to Winston-Salem to Wake Forest, I think it's Baptist Hospital.
Yeah.
And go in there, and it was a process. Like, you knew what exit to get off. You knew what parking lot to park into. You knew, it just became a pattern. And over time, you kind of got used to it, but it was part of your life, and it was a lot. But over time, they tried to go through some different procedures and tests to try to help eliminate some of that. And a lot of that was from just so many open heart surgeries she had, that she had scar tissue built around her heart, and her heart couldn't expand properly. It was kind of like putting it in a rubber ball and closing it in, and just couldn't beat properly.
Because of the surgery? Or
because of all the surgeries she had.
Okay. Right.
So, like, if we had surgeries over time, scar tissue would start to build up. And it's just that's what her body was doing, was building the scar tissue back to kind of like building muscle back. And you know, just that's kind of where it was in her heart. So it wasn't allowing her heart to expand and, you know, work properly or operate properly, you know, with the size it was. So we went to Oklahoma City to try to do a procedure at one time that failed. And just, you know, more tests around, and they were just trying anything they could. You know, she was 25, 26, 7 years old, you know, in that age. And here it's like, you're going to try everything you can. But it just wasn't working. And so the one time later on, you know, short period after, we went to the hospital. Well, we never left because they told her that your kidneys are shutting down because your heart can't keep up. And they admitted her upstairs. And so she never left. We had talked briefly with certain staff of the hospital about options. And transplant was one of them. And here I am, 27, 28 years old. Like, what am I getting into? You know, I just... You know, here I'm not a medical doctor. I don't know all these terms. I mean, if I cut myself, I just put a Band-Aid on it and roll on. You know, that's what I was used to as a mechanic. But doctors come in and said, we're going to put you on a, you know, heart transplant list. You need a heart bad. So we never left.
Now, were you married at the time?
No.
Okay.
We were not married at the time. And so as time was going on, we were trying to plan a wedding. You know, we're thinking this, you know, unfortunately, the holidays are the best time for this. Unfortunately, somebody's life is gone before somebody else's gains. To be an organ donor is something I will support and be behind all that I can. Again, somebody's misfortune is somebody's fortune. And we met the family after she received this heart transplant. And they were so thankful that we continued on and built a relationship. To this day, 2024, the mother of the gentleman that passed still sends my son a Christmas card. Jagger. And that's touching. And it's just a Merry Christmas. Hope you have a blessed day. And it shows up in the mail. It's to this day. And here we are 20 years later.
So how did you get the word that you had a match?
So with all the...
You were still in the... She was still in the hospital?
Yeah, she was in the hospital.
Where at?
And at Wake Forest Baptist.
Wake Forest.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's when I was at Roush. And so I was...
What year was this?
So that would have been 2001, roughly. Yeah. So we had transitioned from Mark Martin to Kurt Busch. I was still at Roush with Jimmy Fenning, working for Kurt Busch now. Our shop was in Concord. I would leave Concord, drive up 85. I'd go to the hospital after work. I'd get there at 6:30, 7 o'clock. Spend the night, eat dinner, hang out, spend the night. We didn't have kids or nothing. I would leave the hospital at 5:30 in the morning. I'd stay right in the room. I'd drive down 40 over to 77, and I'd go by our house, pick up the mail, check on everything, make sure everything was fine at our house. I'd be to work by 7:30 in Concord. I made this circle every day for about 5 months. That was my cycle. That's how I had to live. I'd go by and get clothes, go to work, and I just, there. Now, if I had something come up, we were going to race weekends, whatever, I would go up maybe Sunday night after we got back, depending on how late it was, depending on where we were. Or I would just wait and come up Monday. But we always talked on the phone. Again, we didn't really have cell phones back then. So it was the old hospital phone was ringing. You'd have to call through the switchboard to kind of get in there, and talk. And
now, were you still changing tires and everything?
yeah, yes. So I was car chief with Kurt Busch, but I had worked it out with Jimmy Fenning. He was phenomenal, the best crew chief that I ever worked under. To this day, I would do anything in the world for him that I could. He was very accommodating to me, and very supportive of anything that he could do. Now, it was a lot of work on me to make sure that I lived up to my credibility, that I was at work on time. I didn't leave early. I didn't take advantage, and I worked my time, did my deal, and it was almost like this period of time of Tera was secondary because racing was still my life, and Tera knew that, but Tera was always in my mind, but I always took care of the race car stuff first. After work, like I said, I got on 85 and boogied north, and there we went. So I did that cycle for probably 5 to 6 months while Tara was still in the hospital.
When did she get her transplant?
It was in July 2001, I believe. I got the call, and I keep talking about this cell phone thing because literally this is my hotel phone rang in Pocono. Every racetrack we went to, I would have to, when we spoke, I would give her the number of the hotel, the room that I was in case she ever needed, because we didn't have cell phones. I mean, we may have, little big bag phones and all that we didn't, we didn't carry them with us all the time. But we were in Pocono, and it was always the plan that I may have to leave. Don't know when, because with a transplant, you don't know your time. You don't know when it's going to happen. And I got a call, and it was about 3:30 in the morning. Hotel phone rings. It's kind of like, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah.
You're thinking the front desk is calling and there's a fire alarm going off. But the first thing I heard on the phone was, it's time. Luckily, I answered the phone. My roommate didn't answer. I answered.
Tara?
And it was Tara on the phone. And she said, it's time. And here I'm puzzled. I don't know what's to kind of put it all together real quickly. And, I'm thinking the extreme just happened. Like, it's time. Like, her time is up. It's her body is not going to support anymore. But it wasn't. She was happy. She was excited. She said, it's time. So I jumped on the phone, and I called Jimmy Fenning, and he got a hold of Jack Roush, and I met Jack Roush in the lobby in 30 minutes, and went to the airport, and me and Mr. Roush went from Pocono to Winston-Salem Airport, and he dropped me off.
So he flew you.
Jack Roush flew me himself, and I sat co-pilot with him in his jet, and as we were landing in Winston-Salem, again, it's the middle of the night, we probably took off about 4:30ish, it's early morning, not many people are up. As we were landing, the medical plane was taking off. And I didn't know it because I wasn't in the airlines. He knew it though. He said, "There goes the hospital's plane." So he called on the radio and knew where it was going. He asked through his communication through the tower and whatever, asked where that plane was going, and they told him, and said he's going to Savannah, Georgia. So I kind of knew then. I didn't know the situation. I didn't know if it was a car wreck, whatever happened. I just knew that plane was going to Savannah. And I got off, and I think I took a taxi from the airport. Here it is, 4:30 in the morning. How am I getting a taxi, in Winston-Salem to get to who wants a taxi that early in the morning? So anyways, I got a ride over to the emergency room, and they were getting her set up. And, there's a process that they go through. The preacher comes in and talks and goes over things, and the doctors are coming in. And, they're getting prepared because you're on the clock. Once they get the green light, the doctors are en route, and there's certain time. I mean, they're down to the time. And so there was a process that we had to go through everything, and we said our goodbyes, and hopefully said we'll see you later. And at that point, it's just, they take her away. You don't know what the outcome will be. You're hoping for the best. But, back again, this is 20, 25 years ago. Technology has changed so much to where it is today. And but we didn't think about it then. But it all worked out well. There were some complications when it was all said and done, but we got through them and worked through them. It was some medicine, treatments and some therapy type stuff, but it all worked out well.
When did you get married?
2000. So this was in that before she was in the hospital, come out. And then she went back in. We got married, and she went back in for the transplant. I kind of had my timing off there a little bit.
Okay, all right. So you were married when she got the transplant?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So there was through the time of trying to do some other treatments of stuff. We were in and out of the hospital, but the one time we did go in the hospital, we were married because we got married in November of 2000, and it wasn't long after that is when she went to the hospital and they kept her. They said, you're not strong enough to go home. And while she was in there, she was strong. She would come up with this thing of making green ribbons, which was the symbol of donors, organ donation. And I would take a whole bag of them, and I would take them to the racetrack. And by word of mouth from friends that were on our team, hey, they were handing them out to people. And the story took off, and it was very touching to know that the NASCAR family that was there, that was supporting you all across. Very thankful, like I said, for Jimmy Fenning, Jack Roush, the whole Roush organization at the time. But I only missed one race. And as that race was getting ready to start, Tara was still in surgery. And myself and her grandfather actually snuck down the hallway into a room, a patient's room, which there was nobody in there. It was an empty room because you couldn't go in the waiting room. There was hundreds of people in there, and the last thing they want to do is watch a NASCAR race. So we kind of went down the hallway, went in there and turned the TV on, and we were watching the race. We were sit up on the bed and, do it. And if we didn't get any updates, they knew to come down there and get us. But we ended up going down there and watched the start of the race because it was in our blood. That racing was in our blood. And
that was Pocono,
yes.
July of 2001.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. At what point did you and she start considering adoption?
Well, we knew there wasn't going to be a honeymoon because her condition, even though she had a new heart, there were still complications to deal with. So flying and being away from her doctors for a period of time was not recommended. So that was changing our lifestyle, which also during that same conversation was kids are probably not recommended.
Yeah.
And I don't even remember what brought up adoption. Somehow God led us to that conversation. And so we started the process of looking into an adoption. There was international at the time, which international for me, somebody in the NASCAR industry wasn't going to work because you have to go over there to the orphanages for like a week ahead of time. And then you come home and then you go back for another week and you adopt your child. And it's like, I don't have that much time in racing. I mean, we're racing 365 days or working, seems like that many days. So there's really wasn't that time. So we started looking at domestic. and just filling out the paperwork. We got through the process of the people.
Now, was this before or after the surgery?
This was after.
After. Okay.
Yeah. So we were, and she was recovering from things, we had to make sure her strength was better and, she was doing well. And again, small complications, but nothing like what we went through months before. And just went through the process and paperwork and all the proper channels. And we knew a family had picked us, and he was going to be born in July
Of
2003. And but we started this process in 2002, at the end of 2002, middle of 2002, 2002. Because it's a process to go through. You have to do home assessments, you have to do paperwork, and it just it's a dragged out for the good, but it's they run you through the ringer, to check it all. And when we found a family had chose us, and he was going to be born in Florida. Well, at the same time,
well, just swing by on the way to the race.
right? Daytona's going to be, because they said it was going to be July the 4th. Well, here we are. We're racing. We'll be in Daytona. It's no problem. We'll just make the whole trip work. Well, at that same time, remember, I transitioned from Roush racing at this time over to Robert Yates racing. So I was working with a different team. Things were different. I couldn't just take days when I wanted to. Again, I have to. This is our team. We can't let people down and be gone. But it all worked out that after the July race, I flew home on our plane, and she called me the next day, and she said, I'm on my way to the hospital. And I'm thinking, heart problem, heart condition, something's going on. That was my, not thinking that the child that we were getting ready to adopt was coming to the world. She said, no, I'm away to go meet Jagger. Well, we'd already named him at the time. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was at home in Cornelius because I was getting ready to go work the next day. Got home Sunday morning, and she stayed down there. And
she stayed in
Daytona.
Daytona, okay.
Because we were down there for the race.
Right.
So instead of her coming back and forth, she just stayed there, and I went back home in case I had to work. But I ended up flying back down Sunday afternoon, and they picked me up at the airport, and we went, and he was already born by the time I got there because of commercial flight timing and all that. But she'd already been there, held him, and there was the joy brought into our world.